back to another Mastering the Basics lesson for English Speaking Complete. Today we're going to be looking at another very important aspect of languages, as well as, of course, the English language, and that is verbs. Now, a lot of you will know what verbs are. They describe actions. They are doing words. In English language, we have two main types of verbs, and that's really what we're going to focus on today, both irregular and irregular verbs. Understanding the difference will be really important to show your overall levels of fluency and make less mistakes in your English speaking too. So let's jump right into our lesson on regular and irregular verbs. So, as we all know, verbs are action words that are used in the English language as well as many other languages too. It goes without saying how important they are. Each verb can be separated into three main groups. So we can have one verb in three different groups, which is base form, past form, and the past participle. Let's take a look at an example. Laugh, the verb laugh. Base form, laugh. Past form would be laughed, and the past participle is laughed. So when it comes to the base form, that could be what we use in present and future tense. I laugh a lot. Now, I'm talking about general situation now. In the past tense, I laughed a lot last weekend. The past participle is a more advanced type of tense, and more advanced type of grammar as well, and we'll be coming on to that much later. But for now, it's important that you are able to identify past participles as well. However, we'll be talking about the past participle in much more detail later. Let's take a look at some more examples. We have walk and walked, and the past participle walked again. So we can see in this example, the base form is walk, and both the past and past participle is walked. So the past form and the past participle really are different ways to talk about the past tense. Here's another example. Drink. What might the simple past form of this verb be? Instead of ed, drink becomes drank in the past form, and in the past participle we have drunk. Here's another example. Fly. In the past form we don't say flied, we say flew, and the past participle is flown. Three different ways that we can use the same verb, which has of course the same meaning. Now, why are we seeing these different ways to change the verbs? Well, as you may remember, I was talking about regular verbs and irregular verbs. So regular verbs, we just add ed for the past forms, whereas, as we can see here, for irregular verbs, it gets a little bit more tricky. It's not as simple as just adding an ed, something similar. Okay, before we move on, I have a really quick request for you. If you do get chance, please do remember to leave a review and a short note on the course. It really does help keep English Speaking Complete relevant, as well as really helps me in terms of updating and adding new learning resources and English lessons for you. And I really appreciate the support. So let's take a look at regular versus irregular verbs in a little bit more detail. So as said, we can put all English verbs into both regular and irregular categories. Let's take a look at some regular verbs. So for these, we follow a fixed pattern. We can always add a D, an ED, or an IED at the end of the verb. For example, cooked, jumped, piled, studied. Pretty easy to use, pretty easy to form. However, irregular verbs, no fixed pattern. There's no simple rule to create these verbs in different forms, whether that's the past form or the past participle form. Simply put, it is a question of memorizing the different forms of irregular verbs. There's no simple structure that I can teach you, and it's just about practice. It may take you time to be completely fluent in irregular verbs, but it will happen with effort and good studying. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look at this table here. So this is, of course, a short table of verbs. We have on the left-hand side regular verbs, on the right-hand side irregular verbs, and they're pretty common verbs. However, of course, this really isn't everything, but it's just used to emphasize the difference. So we can see here our regular verbs. Simply put, in the past and the past participle forms, we add either a D, an ED, or an IED. Again, the irregular verbs are a bit more difficult. Let's go to the top of this list. We have buy, which then changes into bought, and the past participle is in fact the same, bought. Let's look at the next example. Is it the same? Is the past and the past participle the same again? So we have choose. In the past tense, we have chose. In the past participle, we have chosen. Okay, so things are starting to get a little bit tricky. Let's look at fall. We have fall, fell, fallen. Okay, what pattern are we starting to see, if any at all? So it's definitely worth us considering some of the different patterns we can have for irregular verbs. There's no fixed way to create them. We need to remember them. However, there is a simple or an easier way that we can group irregular verbs. So we can divide irregular verbs into 4 main groups. We still need to memorize them. This won't help us to form irregular verbs in past participles, but this will help us to understand different types of irregular verbs. It will help us to increase our knowledge of the English language. So here is our table, and we have group 1. All forms are the same. So we have put, the verb to put the kettle on, put the plate on the table. And here we can see put. It's the same in any tense that we use. In any time we're discussing, the verb form doesn't change. And that's the same for hit. Just 2 examples for you there. So with some irregular verbs, we don't change anything, although this is slightly less common. This isn't the largest group, I would say. Here is group 2. So we have the same past and past participle. Bring, brought, brought. Find, found, found. So the past and the past participle sometimes can be the same. But we can also have the same base and past participle, with the past form being different. Become, became, become. Run, ran, run. Slightly confusing, a little bit tricky to remember, but again, it is just about practice. Now, it's worth me pointing out that if you do make errors in changing certain forms, in not getting the right form, especially with irregular verbs, don't worry, people will of course still understand you. But in terms of increasing our fluency, we do need to be as accurate as possible. So here's group 4. All forms are different. Wake, woke, woken. See, saw, seen. Again, it's all about memorizing the different verb forms. Okay, so that is the end of the instructional part of our video. And it's now time for us to take a look at our animated video, where we'll see a lot more examples of both regular and irregular verbs.